Hi, I'm Robert Reich. Congress will convene shortly, and that means more battles over taxes and spending, regulations and safety nets, and how to get the economy out of first gear, which in turn means more gridlock and continual showdowns over budget resolutions and the debt ceiling. But before the hostilities start again, and we all get lost in the pure politics of Washington and the petty tactics that we know that go on in our nation's capital, it's useful to consider what's really at stake for our economy and our democracy. For much of the past century, the basic bargain at the heart of America was that employers paid their workers enough to buy what American employers were selling. Government's role was to encourage and enforce this basic bargain. We thereby created a virtuous cycle of higher living standards, more jobs, and better wages. And we had a democracy that worked reasonably well. But the bargain has been broken, and until it's remade, the economy can't mend and our democracy won't be responsive to the majority. Now, in order to understand what's going on, first you need to go back into a bit of history. In 1914, Henry Ford announced he was paying workers on his Model T assembly line $5 a day. That was 3 times what the typical factory employee earned at the time. The Wall Street Journal termed his action an economic crime, but Ford knew it was a cunning business move. The higher wage turned Ford's auto workers into customers who could afford to buy Model Ts. In 2 years, Ford's profits more than doubled. Yet in the years leading up to the great crash of 1929, employers forgot Henry Ford's example. The wages of most American workers actually stagnated even as the economy surged forward. The gains in that era went mainly into corporate profits and into the pockets of the very rich. American families maintained their standard of living by going deeper and deeper into debt, and the rich gambled with their gigantic winnings. In 1929, that debt bubble popped. Does any of this sound familiar? Because it should. The same thing happened in the years leading up to the crash of 2008. The lesson by now should be obvious. When the economy becomes too lopsided, disproportionately benefiting corporate owners and top executives rather than average workers, it tips over. Now, it is still lopsided. We're emerging from the depths of the worst downturn since the Great Depression. But the problem is nothing fundamentally has changed since then. Corporate profits are up, largely because payrolls are down. Even Ford Motor Company is now paying its new hires half what it paid new employees a few years ago. Employee pay overall is now down to the smallest share of the American economy since the government began collecting wages and salary data 60 years ago, and corporate profits are at the largest share of the American economy. I mean, this is a losing game. It's a losing game for corporations of the long term because without enough American consumers, their profitable days are numbered. Europeans are in no mood to buy. India and China are slowing dramatically. Developing nations are in trouble. Now, Republicans claim rich people and big corporations are the real job creators, so their taxes must not be raised. This is baloney. In order to create jobs, businesses need customers, but the rich will spend only a small fraction of what they earn. They park most of whatever they earn wherever around the world they can get the highest return. The real job creators are the vast American middle class, whose spending drives the economy, creates jobs. But as the middle class's share of the total income continues to get squeezed and drop, it can't spend as much as before. Nor can most Americans borrow as they did before the crash of 2008, borrowing that temporarily masked their declining purchasing power. As a result, businesses are still reluctant to hire and pay decent wages, which is why the recovery continues to be so anemic. Here's the other thing. As wealth and income rise to the top, so does political power. Corporations and the rich are able to entrench themselves by keeping low tax rates and special tax breaks, such as the carried interest loophole. Remember that one? It still allows private equity and hedge fund managers to treat their incomes as capital gains, taxed much lower than ordinary income. And at the same time, corporations and the wealthy are ensuring a steady flow of corporate welfare to major businesses, special tax breaks for oil and gas, big agriculture, big insurance, big pharma, and of course Wall Street. All of this, in turn, continues to squeeze public budgets, corrupt government, and undermine our democracy. You get it? The issue is not, and has never been, the size of our government. It's who the government is for. Government has become less responsive to the needs of most citizens and more responsive to the demands of the moneyed interests. The Republican response is to further reduce taxes on the rich, defund programs for the poor, fight unions, allow the median wage to continue to drop, and oppose any limits on campaign contributions or spending. It does not take a great deal of brain power to understand this strategy will lead to an even more lopsided economy, more entrenched wealth, and a more corrupt democracy. So as Congress reconvenes and the battles resume, let's be clear about what's really at stake. The only way back to a buoyant economy is through a productive system whose gains are more widely shared. And the only way back to a responsive democracy is through a political system whose moneyed interests are more effectively constrained. In other words, we must remake the basic bargain at the heart of America. Thanks.